Welcome to the Mr. R Show, brought to you by the Monthly Recurring Revenue Institute. If you're an accounting firm owner or manager seeking harmony between work and life while optimizing profitability, you're in the right place. Our goal? To empower you with the knowledge and tools necessary to enhance both your personal and financial well-being. In every episode, we bring you insights from esteemed individuals in the field who share their valuable expertise and practical steps. Join us on this journey as we collaborate to revolutionize your business and enrich your life.
Hey there, tax pros. I know you missed us here on the Mr. R Show. We are back in action, obviously, as we promised, and we took a little time out not to go sit on a beach anywhere and enjoy life way more than we should, but there's some new stuff out there. So if you have been living under a rock, you must be under a huge rock. We're going to talk today about, on a high level, what the future of a tax and accounting practice looks like. But specifically, we are going to look a little deeper into AI. So if you haven't heard that term AI, hit the pause button, go Google it. You will probably take about 5 years to actually, understand everything that's out there because everybody says it differently, but it's artificial intelligence and how that plays a huge role, not just in your practice or your future practice, but also how you're operating today. So we're going to dive into it as always. We do a very good job here on the Mr. R Show, which, by the way, is brought to you by the Monthly Recurring Revenue Institute. Also, if you didn't know that, but we bring on guests because guests know a specific component of everything we talk about very, very well. And plus, you guys don't want to listen to me and Chris talk for, almost an hour. So Chris, what's happening, man? I know you're my co-host on this, but what's life been like, man? You're a tax guy.
Life's amazing. I think that, we talk about in practice, we've talked about on this podcast that from a work perspective, your practice is going to run exactly how you've engineered it to run. So if you don't like something going on in your practice, sorry to be the bearer of bad news. You got to look in the mirror and you need to say, how do I retool? How do I re-engineer? You're in complete control of how that occurs. The Mr. R Show is a culmination of me, of my 20 plus years of experience running a practice, but also we firmly believe in collaboration over competition, where we are, as we kind of took a small, I don't want to say hiatus, but almost like a retreat from the show, really focusing on the vision and making sure we have the best guests. We already have had amazing guests, but the best guests in the hottest topics for our industry while providing a continuing education. So our practice is going great. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I feel like I have a healthy balance. I won't dive into my pickleball career as much on this podcast as our Teaching Tax Flow podcast, but I had to get mentioned. So pickleball, my duper rating continues to increase as I stay healthy, which is good. But more importantly, I am so excited about the topic today because, let's be honest, if you look at the landscape of the CPA profession, it is a more mature aged landscape. When we talk about not just CPAs, but people that are listening to this podcast, people that are running their own practices are part of typically a small practice, small firm, enrolled agents, CPAs, and technology could be scary. But we have one of the top 25 thought leaders to the accounting profession, CPA, CITP, John Higgins joining us, who is an amazing resource. I had the honor of meeting him about a year ago through the Michigan Association of CPAs. He was the moderator on a panel that they got desperate and probably needed someone to fill in, so they asked me to be on the panel. And he is just a voice in our industry. We were able to lasso him in to join us on the podcast. He speaks to tons of different state societies, has been involved in continuing education. He's not only a speaker, he's a coach, he's an author, and an AI strategist. So today we're going to talk about the future of our profession as tax professionals, tax and accounting professionals, and how technology plays a role and how AI plays a role. But John, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Chris. And John, it's great to be with you guys. Looking forward to the chat.
Yes, we are lucky to have you. And tell us a little bit more about yourself, maybe a couple of personal interest items, and how you journeyed from getting to the point of being at the at the level you're at, in doing what you're doing. Because typically, when someone says, "Oh, you're a CPA," they automatically think that we do tax returns, and all we do is tax returns. So, yeah, can you tell us about your journey a little bit?
All right, well, we'll start with the personal interest and get that out of the way. So I also play pickleball. It's one of the few athletic things that my wife and I could do together, and she's enjoying it. So it's a lot of fun. As you know, Chris, it sounds like you play quite a bit. I also play a lot of ice hockey. That's kind of my real passion.
Oh,
I play all year round. I play 2 or 3 times a week, and whenever I get on the ice with some hockey sticks, pucks, that's fun. And then I like to golf. So those are my kind of 3 passions that keep me when I need to get away from the office, so to speak. So my journey I think it's been an interesting one. I have really enjoyed it myself. I'll just give you a real high level kind of history because I've been around for a while. I started my career in a local firm here. I'm in Rochester, Michigan, about 30 miles north of Detroit. I know, Chris, you have roots in Michigan, right?
yes.
Is that where you're from?
I've spent about 40 years there.
Okay, so you got the roots. So I started with a local firm here in the Detroit area, and that was back in the early 80s. And interestingly enough, this is when the first personal computers came on the scene. So I worked for a 50-person firm, and back then, the leverage was a little different. I think they had 12 partners and, staff of 50. And they got the first IBM PC, one for the whole firm.
Wow.
And they said, "What are you going to do with it?" And somebody said, "Well, let's give it to Higgins because he's running up too much work in process on our tax engagements. So let's get him off in the corner." And, that's kind of the rest is history. So I gravitated towards the technology side of the profession ever since then. And I do a lot on AI, which we'll get to that. But, one of the points I make about AI today, it is as revolutionary as spreadsheets were when they came on the scene, electronic spreadsheets. Now, for you guys, that might sound like, what was he talking about? Spreadsheets have been around there forever. But, when I came in, there were no electronic spreadsheets. So you can imagine, think about all the things you do in a spreadsheet today, tax schedules, carryover schedules, all that stuff. Well, that all used to all be done by pencil and paper. So that was very transformative. And so I left that firm once I got my certificate. I was there about 2 years. I got my CPA certificate. And then I started a business. One of the other guys that worked at the firm with me, he said, this is where everything's going. Let's go and start our own thing. And, I wasn't married at that time, so I really was in a good spot to take some risks. We started the business with virtually nothing. I actually started out in my basement. And, what we did at that business called CompuTools, we sold accounting systems and the local area network systems to support them. And I did CP, help CPAs learn how to use spreadsheets, how to use word processing, how to use database management, and so forth. And so I did that for about 15 years. And then I got a little burned out, frankly, so we could talk about that. And I sold the practice into BDO in the Detroit office. And so I went from my own startup, I had a partner, he left about 4 years into it. So I started that and then sold it to BDO. And so I went from that culture of my own business to now being a national partner in a national firm. So that was a really culture shift, as you can imagine. And it was a good experience. It just reminded me that I really like small business. Mm-hmm. Nothing against BDO. It's just you got people that are 3 states away making decisions about your day-to-day stuff, and it's like, okay, you really don't understand what's going on here.
Right.
But it was a great experience to get that national exposure. I had some staff around the country, and then after that was right at Y2K. So after Y2K, believe it or not, it still amazes me to this day, the firm decided at that point they wanted to kind of get out of technology. And I've always been a big advocate that this profession needs to be more into technology, not less. Now, since then, BDO has come way back into technology. But at that particular point in time, it was frankly all about tax, which you all appreciate, your audience appreciate. They really were doing really well with tax services. And so they did offer me the position then at that point to become an audit partner. And that was like a real quick thanks, but no thanks. I'm not an auditor. So I had another person who worked with me there. He and I struck out on our own and created a company called CPA Crossings. And the name was to really focus on helping CPAs, like your audience, to transition from doing business the more, I would just call it manual way to a digital way. Now, this is back in the early 2000s. So what that meant is showing them how to use, turn their paper documents into digital documents, PDFs, right? That was a big transition for a lot of practitioners. And frankly, it still is for some today, but most of them have done a pretty good job of getting it digital. And so then from there, it was about helping them get to the cloud. And that's still an ongoing journey, of course. And, now today, of course, all the rage is about AI. So I sold that. So that business, that was called CPA Crossings, and that, grew into, again, about a 15-person firm. And it really, what it was is we started out as, my partner Brian Smith and I, we started out as consultants to CPA firms. And then it evolved into more of a CPE business, not really where we had intended it to go, but we developed a lot of CPE programs like this podcast for CPAs on technology. And that was we got into it right about the time when it was the profession was first going to online education. And so we built this webinar model, and we said, gosh, we got the model, let's get other instructors. So we built a consortium, I'll call it, of tax instructors, audit instructors. We probably at one point had up to 30, 40 instructors. They all worked as independent contractors, and they would develop webinars, and then we would distribute them through the state CPA associations. That was a really good market for us. It's always been, really good market for us. And so back in 2020, our largest customer was the Pennsylvania Institute of CPAs. They wanted to acquire CPA Crossings. So sounds good to me. We negotiated and sold the business in 2020. And then I had to continue on for like 3 years to help with the transition. In the September of last year, 23, I started Higgins Advisory, and I'm really enjoying it. What I'm doing is just me, and I have one other person to help me with like business development and client relationships. But I'm just doing a lot of presentations on technology, both virtual and in person. And so right about that time is when things were starting to heat up with Chat GPT. And I've always kind of prided myself on, hey, when there's an emerging technology, learn about it and help the profession move forward with it. So I've spent a lot of the last, 16 months really trying to immerse myself in AI technology as much as possible. And I can tell you one thing, it's like, of all the different technologies I've gotten involved in, this is the one that's like the most challenging because it's just moving so fast. It's really hard to keep up with where it's going, but I'm enjoying it. So that's my tour of my career.
Wow. Well, I wanted to point out something that John, so we've done over almost 90 podcasts for the Teaching Tax Flow podcast, which is our weekly one. We've done a lot of these podcasts. For the first time, John, you have another hockey player.
I know, and his name's John. I knew I liked this guy.
Right, it's a minor miracle. Yep. Usually we've got talking pickleball, travel baseball, volleyball, football, but
John, he's a hockey player. Is that what you're telling me?
So John, I live in Michigan too.
Are you a defenseman?
No, I was an ice hockey goalie for 18 years. So that's why I got some screws loose. I intentionally took frozen rubber pucks to the dome. But it takes a crazy person to hang out with Chris all day. So it is what it is. It works out well. And John, also too, we're obviously this podcast is very focused on tax practices, right, and accounting. But I mean, even if somebody happens to stumble across this and they have nothing to do with the tax world, almost every single person is, we'll call it affected, not in a positive, not in a negative way, just with AI, right? I mean, even in my world, so the marketing space, my father absolutely despises anything to do with AI because he was a very traditional corporate communications guy for General Motors. So he just looks at it and is like, what do you mean this isn't right? Like, it's just crazy that it knows this. Because, he was he had a traveling typewriter. I think he used to be an editor for a magazine back in the day.
Yeah.
So, it's a different thing. And you're right. I mean, you mentioned Chat GPT, right? So that obviously is kind of the most well-known, right? But it's the basis for an endless amount of subscriptions, we'll call them, that people can subscribe to. They can utilize all these tools. And in theory, right, I was just talking to a group of high school students the other day, and they were asking a lot of AI questions. And, of course, I asked them, I said, well, how much do you use it in your classrooms? And surprisingly, they said a lot. I don't know if they were telling me the truth on how they were using it, to be honest. But a lot of it, too, it's all the way down to that level where they're using it just to digest notes and, repurpose content that's out there and just
Yeah.
kind of tweak it a little bit, which is good. And I got into a spinoff conversation, which I'm sure you can talk a lot more too about, just specifically where you see it going with tax practices. Is, I guess, instead of even saying the answer, I'd almost ask you the question: do you think that AI being such a powerful content creation tool, say we're looking at social media, for example, right? Like now one person can create social content for weeks at a time. Do you, in a sense, see that as almost creating too much noise in the world now, or do you see it as an opportunity where people can stand out more?
Yeah, I think too much noise for sure. I remember one of the things I was researching is somebody talked about, today's kind of like a good time for AI in the sense that for the generative AI, if you understand how it works, the base of information that it's working off of is all, for the most part, human-generated content. But over the next few years, that's going to flip, and the majority of the content is going to be AI-generated content. So it's going to be like somebody said, it's going to ultimately be blah, 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 right? So I do, worry about that. And if you ask me what my biggest concern is about AI, I mean, I have some, but not, I'm more positive on it by a long shot. But my biggest concern for CPAs and really for every business person, we get intellectually lazy. It just generates the content for us. We take it for granted. I mean, people do that with spreadsheets today. They just don't audit their spreadsheets a lot of times. But this I can see just be multiple, exponentially a worse case situation in that regard.
Absolutely. And I mean, and as far, and again, you can take this off as deep as you want to, but as far as for, ethics play a part in this. I know some people are really standoffish with anything AI, just from a sense of you're almost letting and I'm trying to like dummy this down for myself a little bit too without making it sound ridiculous. But I know just from being around a lot of tax pros, some of them look at technology as like, nope, we really don't want anything beyond spreadsheets and QuickBooks Online because we don't really want any fingers, or hands in our systems, on our client information, any of this stuff. I mean, how do you perceive that or kind of present on that?
Yeah, one of the things I've learned over the years, because I've helped a lot of, CPAs, small firms, small practitioners, sole practitioners with technology. For whatever reason, what I've evolved to is a lot of those folks like to work. They like doing the work. And so I think there's, they take pride in the work, which is just like any craftsman, right? You take pride in your work. So for them, a lot of times it's hard because you do have to set your ego aside when you start using this stuff. I swear, I'm telling you, I develop courses and I use it all the time. And I think, gosh, that did it better than I did. And I've been doing this for a long time. It can really compose, not just the way it writes it, but just the ability to have access to all the information to create that content. Now for the tax practitioners, where I think there's a really big opportunity is really for all CPAs. I can't tell you for how long I go to conferences and they always have sessions about, you got to become more of a client advisor. It's all been about advisory. I've been hearing that for at least 20 years and probably even longer. Now, so then the challenge was, if you're a tax practitioner, well, first of all, I'm really busy. I don't have time to evolve to become an advisory practice. And then the second thing is, well, how do I do that? And so what I think really a lot of opportunity in the area of AI is it can be your advisory assistant. It can really make it easier for you to be more advisory with your clients when you deliver that tax return. And use the AI to pull information out. And like I say, you got to let your ego to the side a little bit. But you have to understand, when I go to Microsoft's events, they say it's they call it Copilot, not autopilot. It augments you. It doesn't replace you. But there's lots of opportunities to use it to help you. Just literally, if you understand how to deal with the privacy issues, upload a tax return. I know this can be really risky to some folks, but you could upload a tax return and say, identify 3 to 5 things that I could recommend to my client for next year as part of the tax planning process. And it will come back with some really good points. So that's just an example there.
No, that is a good, that's great advice. And I think that, John, I had a flash. I could see your dad breaking open Lotus 1, 2, 3 and thinking that's the end of the world back in the day. But that's really, I don't know. I feel like we do need to embrace it. And I like what you're saying is that you had to put your ego to the side. And I never thought that some people they like to complain about how much work they do, but then they secretly like it. I love helping people out, but there's other things I like to do more.
Well, and I think, it's a little more generational too, for sure. The younger generations is more about a balanced lifestyle, for sure.
That's a great application. Just, when you're talking about transitioning tax return, for AI looking, and we know that the software companies right now are working towards creating they've already done it, right? And say recommending certain tax strategies for people. And I think that with AI, it can be really powerful with creating ideas. I was talking to a prospective client today, and it hit me, and then I wrote it down on my whiteboard. I'm like, with TikTok and with Instagram and all this stuff, tax planning ideas are cheap, but implementation is valuable. So if we think about that Copilot with Microsoft and say, push your time over to the implementation part with your clients and find the most value in that maybe that idea part or the data entry part that we can shift over to AI will free us up to do more valuable activities too. As far as I think that one of the concerns that maybe you could speak on it a little bit is that from tax professionals is that AI is going to take over tax preparation, and I'm interested to get your thoughts because to an extent, yes. I mean, we already have, OCR technology and you could import your W-2, but how is it going to do a Schedule C or Schedule E with, how's it going to weed through source documents? But are you seeing any practitioners use AI on the tax prep side? That's a better question.
Yeah, so it's early. I mean, across the board for the profession, it's still very early. People are trying to figure it out. It needs to be just demystified for them. The software vendors, are working hard to incorporate it, embedding it into their technology. And when I made the point about you got to set your ego aside, what you don't want to set aside is your knowledge, your experience, and your client relationship abilities. I firmly believe that as this evolves, there's going to be a lot more value based upon that personal relationship because your clients aren't going to know what's real, hey, Chris, how do I know that this is a legitimate tax return? Well, it's because Chris, my firm, put this tax return together for you. We didn't just have AI go off and do it. May have helped us to generate it, of course, right?
Right.
So it's going to take care of a lot of that busy work. But at the end of the day, I'm the one that's got to understand your business, your situation as a client, and my expertise in tax and business overall. And yet we have this tool here that's doing a lot more of the grunt work for us. So I think that's how it's going to evolve, but it's still very early. I'm working with a company. I don't know if you've heard of Stanford Tax. They have a new software application that really helps to organize client documents. And I've seen it a little bit with them. I'm actually going to be doing a presentation for them in a few months down the road here. And that's a classic AI application where they're building it from the ground up to fully leverage the capabilities of AI to just handle a lot of that busy work with getting client documents. And I don't have to tell you guys. I mean, what that's challenge is all about.
Oh gosh, I mean, the hardest part about I feel like I say it all the time. The hardest part about the tax preparation process is obtaining documents, right? That's the challenge. I mean, the tax return preparation process is if you have everything, is relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
So for someone listening today, they own a tax practice. They're maybe a manager. They work at a tax practice, or maybe they're working in a big firm, frustrated, like John, all three of us have, left corporate America at some point. What are some of the dip your toes in the water things that a practitioner could do to get started with the AI, to get comfortable, and maybe eliminate one daily task or weekly task? What are some of the things they could do just to start?
Yeah, well, I think the first place to start is just learn about it. There's plenty of information. It's too much actually. So it's like finding the right information. But there's, like the CPA associations and such, they have a lot of good introductory AI courses. I think that, as a CPA professional, of course you have to get the 40 hours of education every year. That, at least 10% or 20% of that should be devoted to AI and if you're tax, AI and tax, because you don't want to get left behind. And I'm not one who's like, I don't like to be a scaremonger, right? And you got to do this or you're going to go out of business. No, I don't believe that. But as time rolls on here, the classic statement that is used a lot in this AI area is will AI, let's just use it for tax practitioners. Is AI going to replace tax practitioners? No. But tax practitioners who use AI will replace tax practitioners who don't. And so, so you want to just, start to build that foundation of knowledge and don't feel you have to know everything about it because that's just not possible. And Sam Altman, who's one of the founders of OpenAI, who makes the Chat GPT, I was watching a video of his the other day, and a couple of things he said was really interesting. He said, Chat GPT is like embarrassingly a crummy product. Okay, well, anybody who uses it would say that's not what it is.
Right.
But he knows what Chat GPT 5 and 6 and 7 are going to look like. But he made the point, he says, we didn't want to wait till we could get to, a more optimal model for this AI because we wanted to get it on the marketplace. We wanted to see how humanity started to adapt to this. And, I don't think it was just a bunch of bunk. I think it really made sense what he's saying. So they want, society to come along with them and just kind of incrementally build their knowledge. So I think that's important to have that foundational knowledge. And then you got to pay attention to what your software vendors are doing because they're all investing in it. And, they're going to make the products easier. A lot of times, they'll say it's AI because you got to, right? You got to have AI in your marketing today, but you may not even really realize it's AI. And who cares what it,
right.
if it's AI or not? If the product's better and gets the work done better, then that's what you want.
When you mentioned the Microsoft Copilot and got a good friend that works at Microsoft, so I've got a lot of information about it just by chance. But I feel like he, as a practitioner, there are a lot of issues with practitioners not time blocking and keeping their email open all day and sucking them into conversations. That being said, I think as a practitioner that can you talk? Are you working with anyone that's started using Copilot or started using AI to help them with common email replies or anything from that perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of people talk about, but I would, because I've been doing a lot of presentations of this to CPA groups, and it's still very early. There's just a lot of people that. So one of the things I do a Chat GPT boot camp course. It's like a 4-credit course.
Okay.
And I asked the question out very early on is, okay, what is your experience with Chat GPT? And typically what it is about 50 to 60% will say, I've heard of it, but I haven't done anything with it. And then you'll get another 30% say, I've tried the free version, I'm just kind of playing around with it. You might get 5% who say, I'm actually using this tool on a day-to-day basis, okay? So that's ChatGPT. Well, and then if you understand the background, Microsoft owns 49% of ChatGPT. So Copilot is ChatGPT inside of the Microsoft 365. So I've been spending a lot of time to learn about it and using it myself. I've kind of, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I've kind of set a little rule for myself that I don't want to use it to generate an email. Because to me, an email should be personal.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's pretty easy for me to tell when something's generated by AI these days because you just kind of tell by the language. Certainly, if I do it for myself, I know that's not me speaking.
Right.
That's somebody else speaking. So for the email, I kind of stay away from that. But gosh, for analyzing documents, or if I have to sometimes I get asked to write an article or to develop a new presentation, a new CPE course, I'll go right to ChatGPT or Copilot. It doesn't matter. No, I'm both sides because of what I do. I have both of them. And I'll just say, write me an outline for a ChatGPT bootcamp course and give me timing. I want a 200 minutes course. Give me the timing, give me the topics. It'll give me a nice outline. And then I can say, drill in on this. I mean, it can literally create the whole course for me. That's that whole intellectually lazy thing again. But on the other hand, it just saves me a lot of time. And I do believe my presentations have gotten better by using it.
I've used it for at least, I probably haven't used it as much as I could, but I've used it a lot of times, especially when you're developing content from scratch and doing presentations for state societies and national organizations. For me, the hardest thing is going from, hey, great news, they want you to present this topic, and it's all in my mind, right? Because I've been doing this for a long time. And but I look down on a blank piece of paper and say, oh gosh, how do I structure this? So even if ChatGPT doesn't what they give me is not what I ultimately use. It at least gets me started of like, here's an outline, spend about 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here, and I might tweak it. I'm going to run my own case studies through our tax preparation I've used my tax projection software. But again, it was helped me kind of get the ball rolling from that blank piece of paper to something moving forward, at least.
And
yeah,
actually,
for sure.
And John, and that's actually a really good segue into something too. And I'm glad we didn't talk about it earlier on in the show. But if you can actually give us a little bit more of a deeper dive into, what exactly AI is. So in case somebody's listening to this, they say, I've heard of this. I've heard Chat GPT. I like it as much as I do my fifth cousin that drives me nuts on Thanksgiving. I think some people may know and they may know about it. So the awareness is there. And heck, they may even use it a little bit, but they really don't, I shouldn't say they don't understand. They don't have an understanding of exactly what's happening based on the inputs and the outputs and really how someone can drive the parameters of an AI-generated piece of content. I think would be great.
Yeah, and so I think the first thing to say is that, so the term AI is kind of like the term internet. Okay, what does the internet mean? Or what does cloud computing mean? I mean, it's just such a broad category. So AI means a lot of different things. And of course, I saw one video clip where there was a trade show and they were promoting electric toothbrushes, and it said powered with AI, right? So, okay. Does it remember the cracks in my teeth where it needs to get works a little hard? I don't know. But anyway, so you see there's a lot of hype about it. And so for everybody to understand today, the tax practitioners, it's really about generative AI. That's what Chat GPT is. That's what Copilot is. And what does that mean in very simple terms is they have this huge data set. So in the case of Chat GPT, it's called a large language model. They scrape the internet for all the publicly available information, and they license with other entities to get their information. They don't disclose exactly who they license with, which comes to an ethical issue we could talk about. But they have this huge database, and I think the current version of Chat GPT I read somewhere is like essentially 1.5 trillion words of written communications from around the world, right? So that's what it's building off of. And then that data set is part of the large language model. Then the application just applies algorithms to all that information. And all it really does is gives weighting to different words or phrases. And in the most basic sense, when you use generative AI, all it is doing when it generates output is predicting the next word in the sentence, or the next string of words in the sentence, or the next sentence in the paragraph, or the next paragraph in the story, and so on. But it's hard to wrap your head around it because when you start using it, it's like, no, I feel like I'm just talking to a human back and forth. It's loaded with information and it's given back to me. But that's what generative AI is. And now at the extreme, we have what's called, and your tax practitioners will like this, AGI. Right? Now, when your tax practitioners hear AGI, we all know what they think, adjusted gross income. But when you're talking about artificial intelligence, that stands for or represents artificial general intelligence. We're not there. We're not anywhere near there yet. We may never get there. But that's at a point when we're on par. The AI humanoid robots are on par with humans as far as thinking, decision-making, maybe even feeling emotion or understanding emotion. I mean, it's crazy stuff out there. That's way out there. But so kind of get rid of the word AI or the term AI and focus on just the fact that it generates content for you. And it does a great job at it.
No, absolutely. I've used it. I mean, I've used it to help me, with content pieces, just kind of, you can't just, in my opinion, you can't just take copy paste it. I mean, you need to look at it, but gosh, it's like a co-pilot. And I love what you said that, AI is not going to put tax people out of business, but tax preparers that use AI are going to put tax preparers that don't use AI out of business. So, I mean, that's huge. What other ways are tax pros diving into using AI now? I mean, obviously, not everyone is in a position where they're putting together continuing education. Although, one of the things we teach in the MRR Institute is that Mr. R show, and Mr. R who's our Kool-Aid man, we feel like it's important for tax pros to niche or segment. It doesn't necessarily need to be an industry. It could, we're all from Michigan here, right? So it could be a small town in I don't know, I'm making up St. Louis, Michigan, the middle of the mitten. And your focus could be on farming, but it could also be on small businesses in your county. And then maybe put a presentation together at your local library or something. But a lot of accountants are afraid they think it's going to take forever to put that presentation together. And that's really where AI can come in and help out too. So, what are some of the other ways that we might not be thinking about AI that can help the everyday tax pro?
Well, I think one of the best options, because I'm sure all your audience uses Excel, or probably Excel as a spreadsheet, right? And they probably use it a lot throughout the day, throughout the week. Chat GPT can be a great tool for automating your Excel spreadsheets. One of the examples I show is I create an amortization schedule. Okay. So if you have a new hire that doesn't really know Excel, and you want to figure out how do I get this person up to speed, they don't even really have to get up to speed, because they could say, tell me how to make an amortization schedule in Excel. And it will give you step-by-step instructions on how to do that. Okay. And all you got to do then is copy and paste into Excel to build the amortization schedule. And then the next part of that I show is, okay, now I've got a 30-year, 360 payment amortization schedule, right? And we're 2 years into it. Well, I don't want to print out for the client the 30 years of, all those future payments. So I went in and told ChatGPT, I said, okay, I uploaded the spreadsheet, right? The amortization schedule, the spreadsheet schedule. And I said, create a macro for me that will prompt the user to print the amortization schedule through a specified payment date. Okay, so I just upload the file. It did that. It created the macro for me in about 2 minutes. It just says, okay, then it gives me step-by-step instructions. Here's what you have to do to paste this into the Excel spreadsheet. And then I run it, and sure enough, it prompts me a nice user prompt, enter the payment through date. I put that in, and then it prints the amortization schedule through that date and eliminates the rest of it. That's just one simple example. So think of all the ways you use spreadsheets, and, because creating macros actually has gotten more difficult over the years than as opposed to used to be easier, but I guess because Excel's gotten more sophisticated. ChatGPT can create your macros. That's workflow automation of a tool that you're using every day. And it can also be your educator for your staff of how to use Excel. And I'm just using Excel because it's such a predominant tool. But you can apply the same to Word or any of the Microsoft applications. Now, just ironically, so Copilot's still fairly new. Okay, ChatGPT today is much better with Excel than Microsoft Copilot.
It's funny how that works out, isn't it?
Some of these documents that we're using to prepare returns or even prepare financial statements are important. I mean, especially for the small practitioner, that amortization schedule is a great example. But what happens, like when you're preparing tax returns, in a perfect world, everyone makes the payment exactly on time on the amortization schedule. Well, sometimes, especially if you have a client that does a lot of land contract work or seller financing, there are lump sum payments, you don't want to have to refigure the whole amortization schedule or buy separate software. This could really be a help in preparing those source documents that ultimately go on the tax return. So,
yeah, I mean, you're the pilot, it's the co-pilot, right? So you tell, because you have that knowledge. See, the stuff you're just talking about is already over my pay grade when it comes to tax stuff. But
I think it helps people, put together the source documents or the support for preparing the tax return. But I agree on the tax planning. I mean, there's so many phase outs and so many different rules that you can, that it can help you out with. It's not just creating the content, but also, just being a co-pilot. Other than ChatGPT, what are some of the other AI? Because this is kind of one of those growing up, again, I could go talk growing up. Maybe this wasn't a Michigan thing, but my mom would always say, "Hey, go get me a Kleenex." And then when I got older, I realized Kleenex is a brand. It's not,
right.
It's a facial tissue. So, just like Bitcoin, now I think people understand Bitcoin is a piece of digital currency. So I think ChatGPT, people use that in just like, at the same term as AI. So what are some of the other AI tools out there specifically for tax and financial pros that they should look at beyond ChatGPT?
Yeah, so I think the first place I would recommend any tax practitioner to look to the software vendors that you're already using, and inquire with them, what are you doing with the generative AI? How are you making your product better? Because they're all doing it. Trust me, they're all doing it. And so I've always been a proponent. If you have software you like and it's working pretty well, the last thing you want to do is go out and change it, right? Because that's a big job. Changing technology, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how good the new technology is. It's a challenge. So if you've got something you like, see if you can't use what the vendor already has and what they're doing to make it better. If they, and I don't want to name names, but there's some of the big players in the market haven't changed much in the last 20 years, their software, right? So then you have a bunch of new innovation coming out there. And because I'm not actively involved in tax, I don't know the names per se. I go to the conferences and I'll stop by their booths and ask them about it. But gosh, if you're not doing that stuff day in and day out, it's hard for me to understand what all they're offering in their products. But that is something I would encourage your audience, if they go to conferences and it's a tax-related conference and you have exhibitors, spend some time with those folks, because they're going to give you some sales stuff, but they know their product, they know where they're going with it, and gosh, there's some startups. I mentioned Stanford Tax already. I mean, this is, I think, just two guys at this point, but man, they've really taken AI technology to streamline that document organization and acquisition process. So,
John, have you run into tax professionals, and maybe you haven't, but that are using AI as far as assisting or analyzing potential specialized tax services? Let me give you an example: research and development credit eligibility, cost segregation studies. Obviously, there's a pause on employer retention tax credits, but it'd be not, I don't know if you've run into any of that type of use for the software.
Yeah, I mean, so some are using it for help them with their research, but what you have to understand is very important with these large language models. Chat GPT, I'll go back to that because it is the Kleenex of the industry today. It's so the data that I was talking about, the data set, it goes through a training process where it puts weightings on the words to help predict forward. Well, it's only been trained through, at this point, April of 2023. So if anything happened since April of 2023, it doesn't even know about it. So if there was a change in the tax law, tax codes, so you got to be careful about that. But it can give you, maybe you're trying to structure a tax deal. You can put in your prompt, as they call it, and the more you can put in as an expert tax professional, the better it's going to be able to give you information back that you can work from. Now, if you use Microsoft Copilot, without getting into the weeds on it, they have different products within Copilot. But Copilot for the web, I'll just call it, that it will look into the large language model to generate output, but it also looks into the web to get current information, and it sources everything. So when it gives you back, you say, okay, I'm trying to structure this M&A deal. I want to know the tax consequences. Give it as much detail as you can. So it'll generate, the response for you, and some of that response will be based upon kind of like a Google search, right? But it references it so you can go click on it then to go see the website where it pulled that information from. Now you got a whole big issue going on right now about intellectual property. So, that's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of years, because who's going to have access to what data?
I want to ask you about something that is somewhat related to AI, but really, you're such a voice, like I said, for the industry, and you consult with many firms on technology in general. And we know that certain, like tax prep software, probably one of the stickiest pieces of technology you can find. Once you're in bed, for lack of a better term, using software, and we've been web-based since Moby Dick was a minnow. But once you're in bed with somebody, it's hard to get divorced, right? And they'll all say, well, we could take, it used to be like, hey, you download this file, when it was on the desktop, the PC, and you upload it here. But I wonder if AI at some point is going to be able to grab, and I know there's privacy issues, but grab tax return information from one tax software and convert that to the other one. I don't know if that's something that anyone's asked about in your seminars or anything like that. But
the question has not come up, but Chris, that seems like probably something you could do today. If you can get the data file, like from your one tax software, if it's a format that it can read, you just tell it to export it to a CVS or whatever kind of file, you might need. If you're talking about actual client data, yeah, if it's not there today, it can't be far away.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some of these depreciation schedules and just really getting rid of all that manual data entry. I want to pivot and talk about technology a little bit too, because not just AI, but I kind of feel we talk about we do a lot of consulting with helping tax professionals leave the traditional punch in the clock billing to the flat fee pricing subscription model. And I always say it's easier to turn a motorcycle around than an 18-wheeler. So for I almost feel like if you're just starting a tax practice now, it is almost easier than maybe buying up existing practice with old technology. What are you seeing some trends? I just in general, as far as from a technology standpoint, and I mean, we all of our technology stacks in the cloud. I can't imagine something being on a desktop, and it's been that way for a long time. But are a lot of tax professionals still using desktop? And what are some of the things that you're seeing that is trending?
Yeah, so I think that, looking like, say, over the last 5 years, there's certainly been a trend for people, and I don't know, like maybe like yourselves a little bit, but where they've worked in firms and they said, okay, this firm's not moving where I want to move, and they're just going on starting their new practices. So they have the beauty of being able to start fresh with no legacy technology to deal with. And those folks are all 100% in the cloud, right? 100% in the cloud. Like you mentioned, you're 100% in the cloud, it sounds like. So, but if you have a firm and you have a legacy firm where they've had, on-premise software, it's a big shift for them, and they're moving. They're finally moving. I mean, gosh, I've been talking about the cloud since the mid-90s, and it's just taken a really long time. But I think more and more they're moving to it. Although, gosh, I just saw I think it was in Accounting Today. They had an article of top firms, top technology firms, and they were like mid-level firms. And one of the questions they asked, what percentage are you to the cloud? Now, some were 100%, but I think there were a couple like at 50%. Gosh, it just seems like behind the times, because the value proposition is so strong, and it's, I guess, partly the practitioners are busy. They don't have time to make the change, or they still have some insecurity about the data privacy, for sure, which is legitimate. You just got to, but I think it's mainly an education issue more than anything else.
I mean, could you imagine your tax professional having your tax return documents saved on their laptop that they're going to Starbucks? And we had Brad Mesner on talking about already on the podcast, talking about data security and WISP. But I'm just saying that's a scary thought, and I guess there's pluses and minuses. People say, what if the internet crashes? Well, if the internet crashes, we all got a lot of problems. So
pickleball.
Yeah, that wouldn't be terrible. But with the technology part of it, and all the new practitioners are completely in the cloud. And as far as there's tax prep software, there's the bookkeeping software. What are some of the other things that you're seeing that are kind of coming into the market, or I guess let me rephrase it. What are some of the objections you get from older brick and mortar kind of traditional firms to embracing technology?
Well, sadly to say, I mean, price or cost is still a big concern, and it's just for many it's I think a challenge to really understand the ROI they can get on an investment. I mean, I still hear people complaining about spending whatever it is, $40 a month for QuickBooks, and I try to, educate them. Understand, you're not just getting a piece of software. You're getting this whole infrastructure behind you. You're getting this, data center behind. You've got Intuit making sure that everything's working properly. And just like anybody, they're going to have problems, of course. But just pick out Intuit as an example. And, it's like Microsoft Copilot costs $30 additional per month per user. So at first it's like, whoa, that's a lot of money. I get that. But if you can't figure out how to save that amount of time in the first week, every week of the month, that you're not getting the picture. These technologies pay for themselves pretty quickly.
And we've always embraced technology as actually another team member. So if I've got a great technology stack, I might have a firm of 3 people, but I really have a firm of 4. That's just my mentality. And so the smaller you are, believe it or not, the more important technology is, I think. If you had, and this might be putting you on the spot, but if you had to assign for a normal tax practice kind of a fixed cost that someone should allocate per client to technology. We're talking, their client portal, their
per client or per just how do are you kind of get into what should you budget for technology?
Yeah, what should your budget be of gross revenue towards technology? And then if you had to assign, because all firms are different, but the way I look at it is, we were talking, in one of our mastermind groups about onboarding fees, and my thought was, there's a certain cost to onboard a client for them to use the technology you have, and so that cost has to get passed on to the clients at some point. I think it's my opinion, it should be sooner than later, but yeah, so I guess percent of revenue in general, and then maybe a per head, per client overhead cost.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that it also, of course, it depends what you add into the bucket of technology, right? But gosh, I don't know. I would say it should be probably 20%. I'm going to go out on revenue, because per client's going to vary, because every different size clients and stuff. But I would say 20% of revenue, or maybe 20% of a staff's compensation. It's at least double what most practitioners believe it should be. Okay, let's go with that, because I'm telling you, just for me with Chat GPT and Copilot now, in the time I've been using it, my time to develop a course, because that's my tax return, is developing a course, I've dropped 40%. It's 40% of my time is taken out, and I believe the quality is better.
Absolutely, and you could probably update it pretty quickly. Case studies and that sort of stuff too, because some of the metrics I've heard is, and now we develop our courses and stuff, and not all of our courses are for CP. Some of them are for industries like real estate, and some of them are actually for CEs. But the ratio for course development I've heard is as high as 20 to 1, 20 hours for each CPE plus. So you're saying that it's really cut down on the prep time for.
It has, yeah, for sure. I mean, just doing the initial research, because now you have the world of information at your fingertips.
Is it?
You just got to know how to use your fingertips to write the prompt to get what you want. And then, I mean, in Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, I can take the outline that Chat GPT or Copilot generates, and I can say make a PowerPoint of it. It will make the PowerPoint. It'll put graphics in there. It puts images in there for me.
Yeah.
And so now, that can be time consuming. That can be, 4 hours to create a 20-slide presentation. Well, now that's gone from 4 hours down to 45 minutes, because I just have to spend some time cleaning it up and rearranging things and so forth, as an example.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I would equate it to, because baseball is my favorite sport, knowing exactly what pitch you're getting before. You still have to hit it, but if I know a guy's giving me a fastball on the outside of the corner of the plate, I'm intent, and then I'm going to move up on the plate, move closer. But if I know I'm getting a curveball, then I'm probably going to move up, and I know I have a little more time. You still got to put the bat on it, but knowing the pitch that's coming is huge. And if you're not using that, then you're always guessing.
Yeah.
Well, I know, guys, that we've talked on this for a good bit here, and we could probably continue to do this for a long time. And the good thing is it's ever going to evolve, right? So we'll have new conversations on this for sure. And kind of a little bit of an odd suggestion, right? If somebody's really standoffish of even looking at Chat GPT, I mean, I just did it moments ago. Almost have fun with it, and you'll get more comfortable with it, right? Like I literally asked the prompt of, what is an entertaining definition of a tax pro? And I'll read one segment of it instead of the full paragraph, but it says, again, AI generated. And you heard the prompt. It says, a tax pro is like the wizard of the financial realm, wielding their magical knowledge of tax codes and regulations to navigate the labyrinth world of taxes. They are the Sherlock Holmes of deductions.
There you go.
So I think on that note, again, just have fun with it. I hear a lot of people in and out of the tax pro world treating it as like an assistant, right? So speak to it and kind of consider, that and the prompts being the questions, the guidance, everything that you feed into it.
But, and I feel like a wizard now. I feel like I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons again, not to get into all the nerdy things I did when I was a kid. But John, to wrap it up, how, we do get a lot of tax pros listening. If someone wanted to think about working with you, contact you, what's the best way? And we'll put it in the show notes also. What's the best first step that they can take?
Just email me, John at HigginsAdvisoryLLC.com. And I'm always happy to have a conversation, to give some insight and, see where they're at, what they're trying to accomplish. If I can help them, I can help them. If I know somebody else can help them better, then I'll steer them that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, gentlemen, for diving into the topic here with us back on the Mr. R Show. And next time, we'll look into another topic as well. But thank you, John. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris. Enjoyed it.
I guess. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you much.
The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum. The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer.